As a home buyer or a home seller, will you have to pay your real estate agent's commission going forward? I'm sure you've seen there's a lot of misinformation out there, either from the news or people who just don't know much to begin with about the process of buying or selling real estate. So I am a local real estate agent here in the Palm Springs area. You can see all the videos I've made here on my channel, giving people the pros and cons even about living here in the desert. So I want to tell you some good things I think about this court case and maybe some negative things as well. And also how, as a home buyer, for example, how could you not pay commission? What are the ways you could avoid commission? And what would I have to also say to you if you're thinking about selling a home? My name is Tommy Jordan, your Palm Springs area realtor. This video is going to be interesting. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe if you're interested in learning about the Palm Springs area on a weekly basis. So the first thing I want to talk to you is how things have been traditionally done. Because if you're not aware of that process, then these changes that have been implemented or will be implemented later this year won't make any sense. So let's just talk about the process. So typically, before a home is put on the market, and a listing agent meets with a seller. Okay, a listing agent is someone who represents the seller in the transaction to help that seller sell their home. And then typically you have a buyer's agent, sometimes called a selling agent, but we'll just call it a buyer's agent to make things simple, okay? And that buyer's agent represents the buyer. So the listing agent will meet with the home seller. They'll talk about different things like, okay, are you selling it furnished? What's the listing price gonna be? What that agent's going to do to market the home, and lots of different things, right? One of the big things in that appointment, in that meeting, is they're talking about the commission that agent will be receiving as the listing agent, and also what the buyer's agent will be receiving. So the first thing that's been wrong in a lot of different news outlets and just people, a lot of misinformation, is that commission has always been up for negotiation. Some agents will go into a listing appointment, and some of them, even for, I've seen like $50 million homes in Los Angeles, and they'll get 6% commission, 3% for the listing side, 3% for the buyer's agent, and sometimes it's 5%, 2.5% for one side and 2.5% for the other side. I mean, sometimes there's 2% offered on the MLS. Sometimes there's even less than that, but those sellers usually don't really have any luck selling their home because the commission's so low. But that's a whole nother thing we could get into. But this is typically how it's been done. Now, and let's talk about before we go into the next part, okay? There's a lot of different parts, and I'm trying to make this easy to follow. So typically, right, now we know what happens with the seller. So if you're working with a buyer's agent, someone representing you as a buyer, right, well, you'll go look at just various properties. And when that agent takes you to the property, they'll see on the multiple listing service a rate that's being advertised, what the seller's willing to pay your commission. So I'll see when I'm taking a buyer, whether it's a $500,000 house or it's a $3 million house I'm showing, there will be a percent being offered. And the seller's basically willing to pay this because they're compensating you for procuring that buyer and bringing that buyer that will buy their house, okay? So it's the real estate, what a lot of people don't understand is, last year, I helped about 20 buyers buy homes, 20 different families, people from all around the world, from YouTube, by the way. So thank you all who have worked with me and watched my videos. It means a lot. So, with all these different buyers, when I'm taking them out, there's different rates being offered or advertised, right? And when I put those clients under contract at the end of that 30-day escrow, typically escrows are 30 days, then the seller pays me through the escrow company. That's just the way it's always been done. Now going forward, the biggest change is that when a listing agent meets with a seller, okay, if you're thinking about selling your home, the listing agent will meet with you and they'll only negotiate their side of the commission. By the way, a lot of these things I'm saying are subject to change because all of this is in the works currently. But they'll meet with you and just negotiate their commission, okay? And most likely they'll tell you if a buyer's agent is bringing a buyer, okay, you're most likely going to have to compensate them if you want to sell your house. Because on the MLS, it's now going to say zero. There's not going to be any compensation. This is the big major change. So before, it was just this system that everyone sort of understood. But now there's not going to be any compensation offered on the MLS. So what's going to happen going forward? Well, let's talk about it. And this is really important, whether you're a home seller or a buyer, but everyone eventually buys and everyone eventually sells. But if you're a buyer, this is what's going to happen. And I think this is one of the good changes that's coming to the real estate industry. And I think it's going to protect a lot of agents and a lot of buyers, right? Because when you now go to buy a home, you're going to have to sign a buyer's representation agreement with a buyer. See, listing agents have always signed an agreement with home sellers. That's always how they've begun that relationship, that the formal relationship with that contract, with that residential listing agreement, okay? So that's always how it's been done. And with buyers, it hasn't been like that. And I typically don't do buyer representation agreements, or haven't in the past before these changes. Sorry, I had a little sneeze coming there. I haven't done them because everyone I work with, I trust and I have a good relationship with, and they see the value I'm providing. But there will be agents who show homes for weeks, maybe months with a buyer, and they don't have any written formal agreement. And then that buyer will just like go into an open house. They like the house, that listing agent sitting at the open house, and they'll help that buyer write up an offer. And then all of that hard time and work that buyer's agent put in weekend after weekend is gone, and they can't provide for their family. They don't get compensated for their time, because that's the funny thing a lot of people don't understand. Real estate agents aren't compensated until the deal closes, until a house sells, whether you're representing a home seller or you help that buyer get to the finish line and escrow closes and they get the keys and they're the new homeowner. Like, you're not compensated. So people think realtors make a lot of money. The average realtor maybe makes $40,000 a year in the US, maybe sells 1 to 2 homes, okay? So the good realtors that are selling, 15 plus homes, okay? Like I sold 20 homes last year with just buyers. You're working night and day. I have people calling me at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, 5 in the morning. Like, it's a lifestyle, and I love it. And you can't excel in this business unless you love it, because you're working as much as a doctor on call. You're working weekends, you're working nights, and a lot of people don't see that. They watch $1 million listing and they see this agent make $200,000 and they go, oh wow, realtors are overpaid. But they don't realize that agent's maybe been in the business for 20 years, and that agent's spending maybe hundreds of thousands a year just on marketing. I mean, there's a lot people just don't understand. But let's go back to what we were talking about, okay? Now, if you're a buyer, buyers will have to sign a buyer's representation agreement. So I think this is good because, one, there's going to just be it's going to be a more formal process, right? Like, if you're a buyer, you're going to actually have to commit to one agent. So you're going to have to really think, is this agent bringing me value? There's a lot of people out there that use family and friends who are realtors, because everyone in California has their real estate license. And I don't think anything's wrong with that. But if you're, making one of the biggest financial decisions in your life, and you're using someone who sells 1 or 2 homes a year and doesn't do this full time, you're really, just cutting yourself short, because a good agent could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, when we talk about home inspections, when we talk about the art of negotiation, looking at contracts, like, there's a lot on the line, okay? And you want representation, and you want someone who brings a lot to the table, okay? That's why some realtors make millions a year, because they bring a lot to the table and there's a lot of value there. So I think, one, this whole thing with commission not being offered on the MLS, either the buyer having to pay it or the seller. And I'll talk about how, if you're a buyer, you can get the seller to pay it here in a second. But I think it's going to get rid of a lot of part-time agents who don't take this seriously, who don't really give a lot of value to their clients. They basically just hop in the car and just, open up a door, and it's like, you want to make an offer or not? There's no in-depth afterwards say, like when I'm with clients, we're analyzing the property. I'm sending them a market market analysis report of the home, of the comps in the neighborhood, of where I see that area going with home prices, the values, just is this in a good part of town? There's just so much that goes into it that if you do this part-time, it's hard to build up the relationships with different people like plumbers and gardeners and escrow officers and home inspectors that just the full-time people have. 10% of the realtors really do 90% of the business for this very reason. So I think it's going to bring more professionalism to the industry. I think more home buyers, you're going to get a better experience with now buyer representation agreements being signed, because agents are going to have to actually work hard, the ones that don't, and they're going to have to actually provide value. That's why I started this YouTube channel, because I didn't want to just be like every other agent out there, who's maybe door knocking, cold calling, all that, and none of that's bad. I did that and it works, okay? But I wanted to create something where I could provide so much value to people for free and not expecting anything returned, like genuinely, and then people would want to work with me, okay? And it's been a beautiful experience, okay? I can honestly say that. And I think it's just we're going to get a lot, because real estate, let's be real, there's not much you have to do. You read like 3 books and you take a test, okay? And the barrier to, like, I have a college degree, a lot of realtors don't. And that's not like, I'm not like just like saying anything bad about realtors who have a college degree or don't. I'm just saying, like, it's not like being an attorney or a doctor. There's a lot of schooling involved, and there's a lot you have to do to prove yourself to be in that line of work. Real estate agents, it's a very low barrier to entry. And that's why, like car salesmen, sometimes the industry gets a bad rap. People don't have good vibes with realtors because, the barrier to entry is so low that there's a lot of shenanigans sometimes that takes place with realtors. So I think the buyers having to sign the buyer's representation agreements, good, okay? I think the commission not being offered on the MLS is going to make things a little complicated here for a little bit, but I think details will be more ironed out as things go on. One thing, let's get to the next point. As a buyer, this is how you could basically not have to pay commission, okay, for your agent. Because if the seller's not paying, you as the buyer, you're going to have to pay, right? I mean, who's going to pay that agent to help you? Someone's going to at the end of the day. Or as a buyer, you go directly to listing agent, but then you have to see if they're willing to work for free one side of the deal. But then at the same time, you have this agent representing the seller and you. And I've done it before. And if you're working with someone honest, they could be a kind of Switzerland and neutral party between the two. But at the end of the day, the seller's paying their bills. You're not. Okay, so if you decide not to buy that house, they're still stuck with the seller. So I always recommend to buyers to have your own representation, because if you were going to court, would you want to use the other party's attorney? You would have your own attorney, someone looking out for your best interest. When buying a home, it's a very complicated process. I make it seamless and simple, right? With having a home buyer consultation, learning your criteria. And then, once I know that, I could really make the rest of the journey easy, because I only show you homes in areas that would work for you, etc. But there's a lot that goes into this. So one thing I'm going to be doing for the buyers that work with me, by the way, my contact information is below. I'm helping people every single day from YouTube. I love it. I love homes. I love people. And that's why I do this. Okay. That's really that simple. But this is what I will be putting on my contract. Okay. Seller to credit buyer blank at close of escrow to satisfy buyer's contractual agreement with buyer's broker. Let me say that again. Seller to credit buyer, let's say 3% at close of escrow to satisfy buyer's contractual agreement with buyer's broker. That's what I'll be putting on our contracts when we make an offer. And the seller can negotiate. Maybe they say instead of 3%, maybe 2.5%. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. but that's something I'm looking at doing. And at the end of the day, there will be a time where maybe the rubber meets the road, because if a seller's out there and they're not willing to pay commission, one, all the other sellers who continue doing things like they've been done, and when a buyer comes and says something like this in their offer for the seller to credit, right? Because right now we have seller concessions. Basically, sellers can credit a buyer for different things like requests for repairs or closing cost. And by the way, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac just announced that seller concessions for a commission won't affect loan amounts or won't affect the loan, which is huge, because before it's called interest like party contribution. I'd have to Google the exact term for you. Okay, I'm going off the top of my head. Interested party contributions. It's basically a fancy word for seller concessions. There was a cap. So this is really big news that now the commission that's being offered to the agent is not going to affect anything you get on your home. It's going to be separate from that. So any seller that's not going to be willing to pay the buyer's agent commission at all, I think that their home's just going to sit on the market. It's like a for sale by owner. They've done studies that 90% of buyers out there want to work with an agent. So if you're looking to sell your home, I think by just offering commission, you're going to get a higher price for your home. You're going to get more agents coming to your house, because, agents really are local. They're in their marketplace. If you're a buyer and this seller's not willing to pay, well, it's either going to have to be that you're willing to pay that agent's commission who's representing you, or you go to a different house. That's how it's sort of shaking up. Okay, shaking up. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but that's how it's sort of looking as of this point. So I hope this video helped you. I wanted to just sort of give you context I have some notes here seeing if I missed anything, but I wanted to just give you context. These are the big changes. Commission not being offered on the MLS, okay? So buyer's representation agreements being signed. And then third, when you make an offer, have a good agent who can negotiate for you, but also put in their commission into that offer. And that's why it's really important who you work with to help you. I think this is going to be a really good thing, honestly. I think the agents who work really hard and have a serious business are just going to get more business, and it's just, that's capitalism, right? It's like, the best will survive, So if you want to learn more about the Palm Springs area, my contact information's below. I sound so ruthless, so cold-hearted, but I'm not. You should, as a buyer, find someone who's really gonna help you, and really give you the best experience, and take this seriously. It's not just a little job they're doing for retirement, it's their life. So I feel strongly about this. Watch this next video right here, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Comment down below, maybe comment, maybe don't, depends what you're gonna say. See you later.